Welcome back to the show, folks. This is the Wrap Up, your daily dose of pop culture and movie news, hosted by me, Mr. H Reviews. On today's show, we'll be talking about Men in Black International, because a very long report has come out to basically detail all of the problems that this film has reportedly had during its production, which led to it essentially being a failure. So that will be quite interesting. It's a long report, but we'll get into that. We'll also be touching on potential spoilers for Wonder Woman 1984. So this is your spoiler warning. Just take this now. This is the spoiler warning. But there's apparently some reveals about characterizations and roles in the movie. And then I also just want to touch on some feedback from yesterday's video on the Zack Snyder Darkseid news, which I'll get to as well, because I want to clarify some bits and pieces and some accusations which came through, which is fine. But we'll get to that in a second. If you want to skip ahead to anything that I've just said, the timestamps will be down below in the description box and in a pinned comment. But let's get involved. So Men in Black International. Let's get started with this, okay? So this has opened to not a lot of money. It's not been very, very good. But not only that, it's also been hit critically and by audiences. So normally we'd see a film, sometimes it's divisive with audiences and critics, and it'll either make money or it won't, and people will dispute it. This near universally seems to be not particularly well liked. So we can kind of take a lot of what they're saying here as, we take it with a grain of salt, of course, but I do think that some of this will be true. Especially with what we've been hearing recently about big conglomerate companies and things like this. And we're long known that executives love to get their hands in the pie. But look, it's been several years since the final installment of the original Men in Black trilogy came out, and this past weekend Sony Pictures revived the franchise with Men in Black International. Now, it's with Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson, both people from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, more specifically Thor Ragnarok. So it says, unfortunately for all parties involved with this spin-off, it failed to impress either critically or commercially, opening at a mere 30 million domestic in the latter category. Yeah, so it's not done that well, but it's not done that well by comparison to other Men in Black movies, and also in terms of the money which they would have spent on this. It's not done that well at all. They were really hammering this on the marketing front as well. In fact, even I go to a local View theatre, and they even had like this big opening thing where they would pretend to kind of zap you and things like this. Those spots themselves cost a lot of money, because it's not just a trailer. That is a specific spot which they filmed for that, and then they showed the trailer as well. So they've spent a lot of money on this. Now it says, much like the Hellboy reboot, apparently Men in Black International didn't have the smoothest production. Now, it says The Hollywood Reporter details all the trouble that occurred during the spin-off, which included the script being changed during filming, and director F. Gary Gray nearly leaving the project. So, apparently it all started. The reason why I'm going to this one rather than The Hollywood Reporter is because they've just condensed it. Rather than just going through the Hollywood Reporter one, this is, a quicker source of the information as opposed to piecing chunks out from the other article. So it says, it all started when Sony decided it didn't want to move forward with the long-talked Men in Black Jump Street crossover, which we've heard long rumours about that, which I actually think would have been funny. I think that would have been the way to go, actually. But it says, after producer Neil Mortis, who was one of the main people behind the Fast and Furious franchise until recently, refused to play ball. Since bringing back Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith for Men in Black 4 was deemed an expensive and not as forward-looking proposition, the studio decided to go the spin-off reboot route. Which is true. Will Smith doesn't have the draw that he had before, at all, and Tommy Lee Jones doesn't have draw anyway. So, yeah, I think that they made the right decision there. But it says, Sony reportedly believed that Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson's star power, they're fledglings in terms of their Hollywood career. They're getting there, admittedly, but they're still fledglings, would be enough to bring in new fans. And one insider described Art Markham and Matt Holloway's Men in Black International script as good, hence why Hemsworth and Thompson agreed to star in the movie in the first place. Unfortunately, after David Balbert the Sony executive, I've butchered that name, but who cares, who'd been overseeing Men in Black International, exited the studio last summer. F. Gary Gray and producer Walter Parks, who had a hand in the first Men in Black movie, started clashing. Now, supposedly, this is where it starts getting interesting, early drafts of Men in Black International were edgier and more timely, because one of the massive complaints about this film is it's just a Men in Black film. It's really paint by numbers. And if you're going to reboot it with something fresh, something new. So this would have probably been better. I'm not saying it's going to be good, but better. And the story was tied into the current debate surrounding immigration. Yeah, alright, I spoke too soon. There was even a point where a Beatles-like music group were the villains, and the 4 members would eventually merge into one being. Evidently, these story beats didn't meet Walter Parks' approval, as he oversaw rewrites during pre-production and production. New pages were being delivered to the actors daily. Bad. And the rewrites stripped away what some considered to be the more modern sensibilities. Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson ended up bringing their own dialogue writers. Again, bad. Real bad news. Walter Parks also stepped in to direct Men in Black International on a few occasions, and F. Gary Gray tried to exit the project several times, but was convinced to stay. The two men even fought over things like colour correction. So literally, you've got a producer, an executive, just stepping in to bloody direct the film. And then the actual director going, well, sod this, I'm going to leave, because this is an absolute crock of shit. So in terms of it turning out how it was, and the fact that they even argued over things like colour correction, I mean, that's an absolute joke in and unto itself, is it not? So yeah, it says, interestingly enough, unlike the other recently released Dark Phoenix Men in Black International, it did not have a rough post-production, as there were no major reshoots or public test screenings. However, 2 versions of the movie were tested for friends and family, F. Gary Gray's cut and Walter Parks' cut. Ultimately, Parks' cut was chosen because he had final say. So it doesn't even say that his cut was chosen because it was the better cut, which again is probably the most hilarious part of all of this. So it says, it was also mentioned that Sony did not provide any guidance when Walter Parks and F. Gary Gray were feuding, so they just said, deal with it. What? A source describing the studio as an absentee landlord, and Sony chief Tom Rothman took steps to ensure that its exposure was limited. Assuming all this information is legitimate, I'd be interested in seeing what the edgier and more timely version of Men in Black International looked like. Hindsight is 2020, but if that version of the movie had been released instead, maybe it could have enjoyed a lot more success than the project delivered to the masses. Although the report noted that there appeared to be a lack of urgency to check out the movie. But yeah, I mean, there isn't. No one really cares about Men in Black. It didn't really get anyone's kind of juices flowing. It just was not a particularly great sounding movie. So there you go. That's reportedly the problems that Men in Black International face. It's amazing. We keep hearing producers getting involved with directors, and directors not being able to actually direct, not being able to be the creative minds which they're employed to be. And I find it absolutely fascinating that this still goes on. It is such a shame. Back in the day, you would have a lot of all the directors today, which are highly regarded as probably the best people, were all given projects or managed to fumble their way into projects of their own, and they were questioned and stuff like that, but they ultimately persevered and they made their own things, and now they're lauded over. You know, these are people which we love. And same can't be said for modern day. And I think it's mainly because they just put too much money into films. So executive producers are just going, no, God no, you will do what I say, because if this fails, I'm going to lose a lot of money. But look, that's my take on it all. I'll hand it on over to you. What's your take? Let me know down below in the comment section. Let's move on now to Wonder Woman 1984. I actually can't find where this was originally revealed, but it says, and this is all spoilers ahead, remember, but it says Wonder Woman's new mission. So it says, remember how a good chunk of Batman v Superman revolved around that photo of Diana Prince that Bruce Wayne managed to get off Lex Luthor in order to stop the villain exposing Wonder Woman's existence to the world? Well, it seems that's being thrown out the window in this film. We knew this was probably going to be the case. It says the 80s setting will see the Amazon warrior acting as a spy during the Cold War. and her mission is reportedly to hunt down a nefarious Russian spy. Interesting. I'm surprised they're going this route, but interesting nonetheless. It says, while that may sound covert, the site reveals that in Wonder Woman 1984, Diana, known as a superhero, and that makes sense considering we've already seen her running through the streets of Washington, D.C. and hanging out in a mall. The question is, do Zack Snyder's film no longer count? Yeah, that's the interesting part. So it says, as for Cheetah, we know that she's being played by the Martian's Kristen Wiig. Yep. But some new details about her origin have now come to light. Apparently, Barbara Minerva is a huge fan of Wonder Woman. We knew that anyway, and wants to be just like her. Again, we knew that already. So it says, well, Maxwell Lord offers to help her with this, and while she's initially a hero, her beast side soon becomes more and more difficult to control. Understandably, this leads to the public turning on her, and she inevitably becomes a villain as a result, with Wonder Woman the only one capable of stopping her. That's kind of what was already rumoured, so that's surprising. Now, it says, how does Maxwell Lord help transform Barbara into Cheetah? Okay, so it states that Patty Jenkins has changed his powers in a big way. While his comic book counterpart can control people's minds, Pedro Pascal's version will have the ability to grant people's wishes at a price. Basically, an evil genie. So that explains why Barbara Minerva's Cheetah becomes, too animalistic. Now, this is the interesting stuff. Steve Trevor's return. We've been hearing rumblings about this for a while. But yeah, Lord is indeed the one who somehow brings Steve Trevor back to life. Probably just granting Wonder Woman's wish. So it makes it interesting to say that potentially he will turn evil as well, or at a price. Anyway, so it says the site doesn't reveal what the catch is, but they note that he has a plan and is even said to transfer his soul to none other than Diana Prince's beloved Steve Trevor. So that's surprising. So basically, Steve Trevor becomes Maxwell Lord. Basically. It keeps referencing a site. I actually couldn't see a site when I was looking for this. Yeah, it doesn't. There is no site. You've not even listed a source, but you keep referencing a site. So what do you think? Good news, bad news? What do you think about all of this? Let me know down below in the comment section. I don't mind it. I think the most fascinating part of all of this is just to see whether the Zack Snyder films count. That's my thoughts. Anyway, here from me, I've got no viewer questions. I think people have been emailing in constantly for the Art of Godzilla King of the Monsters giveaway video. If you haven't seen that, go give it a Google search. You can find it over on my YouTube page. It's actually in the Godzilla playlist. I'm giving away 3 copies of The Art of Godzilla King of the Monsters. But anyway, please, if you want your viewer questions submitted to me, or answered by me, you can submit them on the Gmail, MrHreviews@gmail.com. As always, I'm Mr. H. Take care.